On the evening of February 24, 1978, 5 men piled into a 1969 Mercury Montego in Yuba City, California, and drove an hour north to watch a basketball game. Their families called them the Boys, even though they were between 24 and 32 years old. 4 of them, Ted Wire, Jackie Hewitt, Bill Sterling, and Jack Madruga, had mild intellectual disabilities. The 5th, Gary Mathias, had been diagnosed with schizophrenia after a difficult stretch in the Army, but had stabilized on medication and was doing well enough that his doctors called him one of our sterling success cases. They all played together on the Gateway Gators, a recreational basketball team at the Yuba City Vocational Rehabilitation Center. What you need to understand about these 5 men is that they were happy. Not in some distant, abstract way, in the ordinary close-up way that people who know exactly what they want out of a Friday night are happy. They were going to watch UC Davis play Chico State, then drive home, sleep, and get up the next morning for the thing they cared about, most a Special Olympics tournament in Sacramento the following day. The winners got a week-long, all-expenses-paid trip to Los Angeles. According to their families, most of them had already laid out their basketball uniforms the night before. That detail has never left me. Ted Wire was the oldest at 32. He lived with his mother, Imogene, and was known for greeting strangers on the street, whether they wanted to be greeted or not. Madruga, 30, was the driver the most capable of the group, the one everyone relied on to get them where they were going and bring them back. Hewitt loved to laugh. Sterling was quiet. And Mathias, the complicated one, had a history that made some of the other parents uneasy, but by 1978, he was holding down work in his stepfather's gardening business and hadn't had an episode in 2 years. They watched the game. Chico State won. Afterward, they stopped at a convenience store 3 blocks from the stadium, bought sodas and snacks for the drive home, and walked out. Security camera footage from the store is likely the last time anyone saw them alive on their own terms. What happened next is to this day unexplained. The drive from Chico back to Yuba City is straightforward south on Highway 99, about an hour flat farmland the whole way. Instead, Madruga's Mercury Montego was found days later on a remote, snow-covered logging road in the Plumas National Forest, 70 miles east of Chico and 50 miles from home. The car was pointed up the mountain, not down. It had run out of gas but was mechanically sound. The doors were locked. On the back seat sat the uneaten snacks from the convenience store. There is no reason anyone has ever been able to identify for why these 5 men drove up a mountain in the middle of winter in the opposite direction of home, on a road none of them had ever traveled before. A local man named Joseph Schoens later told police that he'd been on the same road that night. His Volkswagen had bottomed out in the snow, and he'd suffered a mild heart attack trying to push it free. Lying on the ground in pain, he said he saw headlights, heard voices, and called out for help. The lights went off. The voices stopped. He called out again. Nothing. He also reported seeing a woman, a small child, and a pickup truck near the car, none of which belonged to the 5 men. Schoen's account is the only window into what may have happened on that road, and it raises as many questions as it answers. He was in significant physical distress, possibly hallucinating. His testimony has never been corroborated. When the boys didn't come home, the families called the Yuba County Sheriff's Office. The response, according to the families, was standard wait 24 hours and call back. That instruction is common procedure for healthy adults. It makes considerably less sense when the missing people have known cognitive disabilities and a psychiatric condition requiring daily medication. No countywide alert went out that night. No immediate search was ordered. I need to explain why that classification matters, because it's not just a bureaucratic label, it determines everything that follows. When someone is reported as a missing adult who may have left voluntarily, you get routine checks and courtesy calls. When someone is classified as an endangered missing person, you get coordinated searches, K-9 units, helicopter support, and interagency cooperation. The families say the boys were treated as the first category. Given what was known about them, they should have been the second. Making it worse, this case fell across 3 county jurisdictions. The men lived in Yuba County. The car was found in Butte County. The trailer where the bodies would eventually be found was in Plumas County. 3 sheriff's departments handled 3 pieces of the same puzzle, and by most accounts, no one owned the whole picture. A tip could cross a county line and die quietly on someone's desk. Good systems catch those gaps. The system here, as one investigator later put it, was 3 phones and some paper. The car was spotted by a forest ranger on February 25th, the day after the men vanished. But the Mercury sat in the snow for days before it was connected to the missing persons report. Snow made searching the surrounding area impossible. Weeks turned into months, and the families waited. On June 4th, 1978, more than 3 months after the 5 men disappeared, a group of motorcyclists exploring trails in Plumas National Forest came across a U.S. Forest Service trailer at the Daniel Zink campground, about 20 miles deeper into the forest from where the car was found. The front window was broken. They opened the door. Ted Wire was inside, lying on a bunk wrapped in 8 sheets, his head covered. He was emaciated. He'd lost nearly 100 pounds from his original 200. His beard suggested he'd been alive for 8 to 13 weeks after the night he vanished. His feet were gangrenous from frostbite. On a small table beside him sat his wallet with cash still inside a nickel ring, engraved Ted, and a gold necklace. He had died of starvation and hypothermia. Here is the part that has haunted everyone who has ever looked at this case. The trailer was stocked. In and around it were 36 cans of military sea rations, enough food for 5 men to survive weeks. Outside sat a large propane tank connected to a heater full of fuel. There were blankets, there were matches. Nearly all of it was untouched. A few cans had been opened. The heater had not been turned on. Ted Wire starved to death a few steps from enough food to keep him alive. In the days that followed, search teams found the skeletal remains of Madruga and Sterling on opposite sides of a road roughly 3 miles from the car and 7 miles from the trailer. Jackie Hewitt's remains were found less than a mile from the trailer, discovered by his own father, Jack Hewitt Sr., who had joined the search. Gary Mathias was never found. His shoes were inside the trailer next to the bunk where Wire died, suggesting he'd swapped footwear with Wire's and walked out into the forest. He has not been seen since. No trace of him has ever turned up, despite checks at mental health institutions across California. The question everyone asks is, why didn't they use the food and the heater? And I have to be honest, I don't know. No one does. There are theories. One is that they were afraid of being arrested for breaking into a federal building and were too cognitively impaired to weigh that fear against freezing to death. Another is that Mathias, as the most functionally capable member of the group, was the one who knew how to operate the supplies, and that when he left, the others couldn't manage on their own. Another is that someone else drove them up that mountain, and whatever happened on that road left them too traumatized or disoriented to think clearly. I've just presented that last theory, as though it carries the same weight as the others, and I need to correct myself. There is no physical evidence of foul play. The car wasn't damaged. There were no signs of violence on the remains. And Schoen's account of other people on the road that night is unreliable at best. The theory that someone forced them up the mountain is popular because it fills the gap that nothing else can, but filling a gap is not the same as evidence. What I am confident about is this: 2 Forest Service workers later claimed they told the Butte County Sheriff's Office during the search period that there was a heated trailer at Daniel Zink campground. If that tip was received and acted on, Wire, who was still alive weeks into the ordeal, might have been saved. Whether the tip was made, whether it reached the right desk, and what was done with it has never been conclusively established. There should be a log entry, a memo, a tasking note. If those documents were never created, that's one kind of failure. If they were created and lost, that's another. Tony Wright, the author who spent years investigating this case, put it simply, none of this makes sense. Dallas Wire, Ted's nephew who was 10 years old when his uncle disappeared, said something that stayed with me longer. For 47 years, you have had whole families of people carrying the weight of not knowing. We have no closure. Ted Wire's mother, Imogene, lived for years after her son's death. People who knew her said she left the porch light on every night in case he came home. This is Johnson. What stays with me about this case isn't the trailer or the uneaten food, it's the classification. Adult who left voluntarily. 5 men with cognitive disabilities missing in winter on a mountain, and the system's first instinct was they probably just went somewhere. The next case has the same logic, almost word for word. Only this time it's not 5 men on a mountain. It's a 24-year-old woman alone at midnight on a road with no lights. And her mother is on the phone begging them to keep her. On the evening of September 16, 2009, Mitris Richardson drove her 1998 Honda Civic along Pacific Coast Highway and pulled into Jeffrey's, an upscale restaurant perched on the cliffs of Malibu with sweeping views of the Pacific. She walked in alone, sat down, and ordered dinner. She was 24 years old, a graduate of Cal State Fullerton, with a degree in psychology planning to get her master's. Her aunt described her as someone who would walk into a room and make sure everyone took notice. She loved to drive, hated to walk, did crossword puzzles, and wouldn't go near a garden because of the bugs. Her mother, Lettice Sutton, once made her wear a romper with knee-high socks to school as punishment for goofing off in class. It was important to have rules, Lettice said. I always taught her to do it right the first time, so you don't have to do it a second time. That evening at Jeffrey's, something was wrong. Mitris told the hostess that she'd been watching a soap opera at work when God instructed her to take the afternoon off. She said she had no parents, just her great-grandmother, Mildred. Staff noticed her behavior growing increasingly erratic. When the bill came, she couldn't pay. The restaurant called Mildred the only number Mitris could remember without her phone contacts, and the 90-year-old woman offered her credit card over the phone, but the restaurant required a physical signature. The employees talked about paying the bill themselves, but they were more worried about Mitris's safety than the money. They called the sheriff. 3 deputies from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department's Malibu Lost Hills station arrived. Mitris was arrested on a misdemeanor charge, essentially not paying for dinner. She was driven 20 miles along dark, winding mountain roads to the station. While Mitris was still in transit, her mother Lettice called the station. The recorded conversation captures what happened next. I am calling. I'm a little frazzled right now, Lettice said. I understand my daughter is being brought into the station. Deputy Yoav Shalev confirmed Mitris was en route. Then Lettice said the words that in hindsight land like a gut punch. I feel safe with her being in custody. It's being released that I'm worried about. It's crazy out here. Shalev told her Mitris would call as soon as she was booked. In his later deposition, Shalev admitted that his shift ended shortly after the call, and that he never told the watch commanders on duty that Mitris's mother had called, that she was concerned about her daughter's mental state, or that she'd offered to pick Mitris up. When asked in the deposition whether he'd gone to tell Mitris to call her mother, his answer was, "No, that's beyond my job description at the time." At 12:28 in the morning on September 17, 2009, Mitris Richardson was released from the Lost Hills station. She walked out into the dark. No cell phone, it had been confiscated during booking. No wallet, it was in her car parked miles away at Jeffrey's. No car, no jacket. The station sat on Monte Nido Canyon Road in the Santa Monica Mountains, unlit, no sidewalks, no public transportation, surrounded by steep terrain and rattlesnake country. The nearest bus stop was miles away and wouldn't be running until morning. Steve Whitmore, spokesman for the Sheriff's Department, later said, "She exhibited no signs of mental illness or intoxication. She was fine. She's an adult. I need to be precise about the law here, because this is where people tend to either overstate or understate what went wrong." The deputies at Lost Hills did not technically break a law by releasing Mitris. She was arrested on a misdemeanor, processed, and released standard procedure. But California's Section 5150 of the Welfare and Institutions Code allows law enforcement to place a person on a 72-hour involuntary psychiatric hold if they are due to mental illness, a danger to themselves or others, or gravely disabled. Multiple people that night, the restaurant staff, the hostess Mitris's own mother, had described behavior consistent with a mental health crisis. The standard for a 5150 hold is not certainty. It's reasonable belief. No one at the station initiated a psychiatric evaluation. And critically, no one called Latisse to say her daughter had been released. Several hours later, at 6:30 in the morning, Mitris was spotted in the backyard of Bill and Karen Smith in the Monte Nido neighborhood, about 5.5 miles from the station. Bill Smith called the sheriff's station. "We had a prowler walking around through the backyard," he said. The deputy asked what she looked like. A tall, slim black woman with afro hair. Very skinny. When Smith opened his window and asked if she was okay, Mitris told him she was resting. That was the last confirmed sighting of Mitris Richardson alive. Her family reported her missing the next morning. The search, her mother would later say, was agonizingly slow. The station's security cameras, which should have recorded Mitris walking out and in which direction she went, were later reported as not functioning that night. During the first organized search in 2009, K9 units picked up Mitris's scent. According to Dr. Rhonda Hampton, a close friend of the family who participated in the searches, the sergeant leading the operation stopped the dogs after they got a hit and did not bring them back the following day, saying they were too tired. During a later search involving a drone, the same sergeant reportedly directed the drone operator away from the area where Mitris's remains would ultimately be found. When asked why he wasn't directing the drone toward that area, he said, "We'll get to it eventually. I'm going to pause here because I realize I've been building a narrative that points toward something darker than negligence, and I owe you the counterargument. It is possible that Mitris, in a state of psychiatric crisis, wandered away from the Smith residence and into Dark Canyon on her own. The terrain is exactly as dangerous as it sounds, steep, remote, no cell service frequented by mountain lions and rattlesnakes. A disoriented person walking into that landscape at night could easily fall. The canyon is 1.5 miles from where she was last seen, a walkable distance even in crisis. I am not saying the sheriff's department killed Mitris Richardson. I'm saying they had a clear opportunity to prevent her death, a mother on the phone, a woman in obvious distress, a psychiatric hold that could have been activated with a single form, and they chose not to use it. The distinction between causing harm and failing to prevent it is legally significant. But for the family left behind, the difference is academic. On August 9, 2010, 11 months after she vanished, park rangers searching for illegal marijuana grows in Dark Canyon found Mitris's remains on a creek bed. Her body was partially mummified and nude. Clothing was later found wadded up in the body bag, not on her body. Her teeth appeared slightly pink, a possible indicator of strangulation, though the coroner couldn't confirm it. The hyoid bone, which can help determine whether someone was strangled, was never recovered. The cause of death was ruled undetermined. In 2011, the Richardson family settled a civil lawsuit with Los Angeles County for $900,000, $450,000 to each parent. No one was disciplined. No one was charged. The Office of Independent Review concluded the deputies acted properly. In 2017, the California Attorney General's office declined to bring charges. Lattice Sutton has spent the years since fighting for policy changes. No one, she told Essence magazine, male or female mental health issues or no mental health issues should be released in a remote area when the city shuts down at 9 p.m. unless someone is there to pick them up or they know the person is safe. Mistress Richardson was buried by her family with her name on the headstone flowers on the grave and people who loved her standing around it. Everything the two women in my last video never received. Johnson here. 2 cases now with the same skeleton. Family knew something was wrong. Family called for help. System said they're adults, they can handle it. And both times they couldn't. The last case is different in one way that makes it worse. There was no warning call, no chance for the family to intervene, because whatever happened inside that house on East Delmar Street happened while everyone was asleep. And the one piece of evidence that might have told us something, a message on an answering machine, was erased. Not by the killer, by a friend. In the early hours of June 7, 1992, Cheryl Levitt went to bed in her home at 1717 East Delmar Street in Springfield, Missouri. She was 47, a hairdresser, a single mother, sharp-tongued and independent. Her daughter Suzanne Streeter, everyone called her Susie, was 19 and had graduated from Kickapoo High School the night before. The graduation ceremony was the last event where anyone saw Cheryl alive. Susie had originally planned to spend the night at a friend's house after the graduation parties. When those plans fell through, she came home to Delmar Street instead, bringing her friend Stacy McCall with her. Stacy was 18, a fellow graduate, cheerful and well-liked. She wasn't supposed to be at the house that night. She was there because of a last-minute change of plans, the kind of mundane teenage decision that in retrospect carries a weight no one could have anticipated. The next morning, June 7th, a group of friends arrived at the house to pick up Susie and Stacy for a day at the water park. The front door was unlocked. The television was on. Susie's Yorkshire Terrier, a small dog prone to barking at strangers, was trotting around the house unharmed. 3 purses sat on the floor. 3 cars sat in the driveway. Cheryl's, Susie's, and Stacy's. No one was home. Janelle Kirby, one of the friends who entered the house, noticed the porch light was out. The glass globe had been smashed, and the shards swept up, not scattered on the ground the way they would be if broken by accident, but collected as though someone had cleaned up after themselves. Inside, nothing was ransacked. Nothing was stolen. Jewelry, cash, and car keys were all in place. There was no blood, no sign of a struggle, no furniture overturned. 3 women had simply stopped existing between midnight and morning. Janelle noticed one more thing. The answering machine had a blinking light. She pressed play. A man's voice, urgent, she said, possibly threatening, though she couldn't recall the exact words later. Then she pressed delete. She has said she thought it was a personal message she shouldn't have heard. She was 19 years old, standing in a quiet house expecting her friends to walk through the door any minute. She didn't know 3 people were missing. She erased what may have been the single most important piece of evidence in the case. That message has never been recovered. I want to say something about this because Janelle Kirby has carried a crushing amount of public blame for decades, and most of it is unfair. She didn't destroy evidence. She deleted what she thought was a voicemail. There's a difference between those 2 things that matters. One implies intent. The other implies a 19-year-old who didn't yet understand she was standing in a crime scene. The anger people feel about the deleted message is real, but it belongs directed at the situation, not at the person who had no way of knowing what she was erasing. Springfield police launched what would become one of the largest investigations in Missouri history. More than 5,000 tips were received. Hundreds of people were interviewed. Cadaver dogs were brought in. Divers searched nearby bodies of water. 33 years later, no bodies have been found. No suspect has been charged. 3 women vanished from inside a locked house, leaving everything behind, and the earth swallowed them. The investigation has circled several figures over the decades without ever closing on any of them. The most persistent name is Robert Craig Cox, a convicted kidnapper and murderer who was living in Springfield at the time and was reportedly seen near the Levitt home in the days before the disappearance. While incarcerated for an unrelated robbery in Texas, Cox allegedly told a fellow inmate that the 3 women were dead and would never be found. When confronted by journalists, Cox has neither confirmed nor denied involvement. He has said on camera that he knows what happened to them, but that he'll never tell, because doing so would implicate him in a crime. He is currently serving a life sentence in Texas and will likely never be charged because there is no physical evidence linking him to the case, and critically, there are no bodies. I need to explain why the absence of bodies matters so much legally, because it's not just a practical problem, it's a structural one. Without remains, you can't establish a cause of death. Without a cause of death, proving murder beyond reasonable doubt becomes extraordinarily difficult. You can charge someone with murder without a body, it's been done, but you need overwhelming circumstantial evidence to compensate for what the jury can't see. Cox's alleged jailhouse statements standing alone aren't enough. An inmate claiming another inmate confessed is among the least reliable categories of testimony in criminal law, and any defense attorney worth their fee would dismantle it in minutes. In 2010, attention turned to a parking garage at what was then Cox Medical Center, now Mercy Hospital, built in 1994, 2 years after the disappearance. Rumors some sourced to construction workers claimed that 3 bodies had been buried beneath the concrete before the structure was poured. Ground-penetrating radar produced ambiguous results. The hospital declined to allow excavation. Law enforcement said they lacked probable cause for a warrant. The garage stands today undisturbed. I know what you want me to say, dig it up. I want to say it too, but I have to be honest about why it hasn't happened and why it might not. Probable cause requires more than a rumor and an ambiguous radar reading. A judge issues a warrant when there is a reasonable belief based on specific facts that evidence of a crime will be found at a specific location. People say there might be bodies under a parking garage does not clear that bar. It might be wrong. It might be unjust. But it's how the system works. And understanding that is more useful than pretending the only thing standing between us and the truth is bureaucratic business. Stacy McCall's mother, Janice, is still alive. She was 43 when her daughter disappeared. She has now waited more than half her life for an answer. In an interview years ago, she said something that I think captures the particular cruelty of this case better than anything a journalist or investigator has ever written. She said she doesn't know whether to grieve or hope. That's not a metaphor. It's a description of what it's like to live for 33 years without knowing if your child is dead. Cheryl Levitt would be 80 if she were alive today. Susie would be 52. Stacy would be 51. 3 purses still sit in an evidence locker somewhere in Springfield, Missouri. 3 cars were eventually moved from the driveway. The porch light was replaced. The house on East Delmar Street has had other tenants since. Most of them don't know what happened there. The ones who do don't stay long. 3 cases, 3 families. The same question. The Yuba County 5 men with disabilities classified as adults who left voluntarily searched for too late, 4 found dead, 1 never found. Mitrites Richardson, a woman in crisis released at midnight without phone, wallet, or car, mother's plea ignored, found dead 11 months later. The Springfield 3. A mother, her daughter, and her daughter's friend vanished from inside their own home 33 years, without a body, a charge, or an answer. The first script I made asked, who decided that finding out who these people were wasn't worth the trouble? This one asks the opposite when we knew exactly who they were, when their families were waiting, when someone was calling for help. Why wasn't that enough? Imogene Wire left the porch light on every night until she died. Lettice Sutton sued the system that released her daughter into the dark. Janice McCall has spent half her life not knowing whether to grieve or hope. None of these mothers needed code breakers, isotope analysis, or DNA genealogy. They needed one person on the other end of the line to say, "All right, we'll help," and no one did.